Let's go ahead and bring on our guest today, Jacob, aka Bioclandestine. So, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Seth. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, absolutely. So, just to give a little bit of context, I discovered you through this Twitter thread that was going viral, where this guy named Bioclandestine with a cool looking avatar of a man in a hat, was kind of mysterious, basically discovered that the areas that Putin was doing airstrikes in his offensives in Ukraine just so happened to line up with the exact locations of all of these US funded biolabs. And you since kicked off what has become now something that everyone's hearing about. Tucker Carlson's talking about it. It was brought up in the UN over the weekend. So give us a little bit of the background of how you discovered that.
Well, not to correct you, but at the time my account was war clandestine, but I
Wow,
had
there we
since
go.
immediately banned. Before that, I was clandestine. I've had over 40 Twitter accounts. So they've been coming for me for quite some time over the course of about 4 years now. But the way I started beginning down this train of thought was initially when the strikes first started, they weren't in the east. They were striking middle and western Ukraine, and none of that made sense because the media narrative we were being told this was about Crimea and the east. So I started digging, and then I came across this map pertaining to the U.S. funded biolabs in Ukraine, and I started matching up where the strikes were at, and they were in the same general vicinity. And then after that, I just started digging more, found the Biological Threat Reduction Program page on the U.S. Embassy. And then I found a Newsweek article of Russia accusing the U.S. of creating bioweapons 4 months ago, I guess maybe 5 months ago now. And China also jumped in. So where there's smoke, there's fire. I kept digging. And the response from the media and the media complex, social media, has pretty much told all of us that we found something they do not want us to talk about.
Yeah, that was the amazing part about it because, I've been censored heavily and you're obviously on your, 40th account on Twitter. And I'm used to seeing people getting censored for questioning the COVID narrative or the jab narrative or
Mhm.
talking about what happened in January, in November 2020. But what really struck me and what really made my ears perk up is when I saw that you got deleted shortly after that thread. And I thought, why would Twitter be going against, they're not following any policy. They hadn't set any policy saying you can't talk about X. It was more
Mhm.
so that you broke this sensitive information and within 24 hours, you were gone. So why do you think they were so quick to censor you?
Well, I know that you are on Facebook and YouTube, so there are probably certain things that I'm not allowed to talk about. But these biolabs in Ukraine, this path leads to finding out about those things we're not allowed to talk about. So that's why they wanted to cover it up, because as soon as the world finds out that the U.S. were creating these things in Ukraine, it's going to lead to the other things that were created a few years ago that have put us in the state of the world that we're in now, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, and actually, so I've learned that the limits I can push, with the media. So, for me to talk about it, we say, look, because to kind of frame it, and I read what you recently posted as well on Telegram, which was what happens when you follow the narrative of these biolabs. It takes you back to Wuhan, the same companies
Mhm.
that were funding and involved, which just so happened to be involved with Hunter Biden, et cetera, ended up tying back into Wuhan, where you then realize this wasn't just something that was cooked up in a lab in China. It ties directly back to Fauci, the NIH, et cetera. And so, do
Correct.
you think that's why this really struck a big, hit a big button for them?
100%. 100%. They
And
they feel as if this is the entry point for us to figure it out, because now the cat's out of the bag. Newland tried to cover it up and tried to paint a narrative. Now they're trying to establish a narrative that Russia is going to be the one releasing these biological weapons after they said there were no biological weapons in Ukraine. So now they're in this mass cover up phase, and they can't seem to get their story straight. And they know that it leads, once we find out that the U.S. are making, if the UN were to invoke Articles 5 and 6 of the Biological Weapons Convention, an investigation will happen into all U.S. biological activity. And they know exactly what they've done. And we have the proof via the emails, Collins and Fauci. They knew. So this is their final stand. They know if this cat gets out of the bag, there's no going back.
so, is this an isolated incident where you see just happening perhaps a little bit in Ukraine or Hong Kong or Taiwan or Wuhan, or is this something? Is that the other reason why they freaked out and why they panicked with this, because once you start digging, I've covered this recently as well, you realize that this is literally what you see happening in Ukraine is literally the tip of the iceberg.
Correct. Yes.
So what does the rest of that iceberg look like?
So the rest of that iceberg goes down the path to lead to the NIH US DoD funding, with which they conduct this funding in other countries to circumvent congressional oversight. So they're able to do things that are illegal in the United States. Now, think about it from our perspective. If we were to have Russia and Mexico and China pushed up with biological laboratories, and then a virus were to leak and shut the world down for 2 years, we might be a little bit mad at Russia as well for putting these biological laboratories near our borders. So I feel that Russia is 100% in the right to have questions, and the USA are doing everything in their power to cover it up, because this iceberg leads to the US NIH creating C-19, as well as a bevy of other crimes surrounding it pertaining to the vaccines, the propaganda, media censorship, social media censorship. This essentially encapsulates the entire deep state and implicates them in a mass crime against humanity, with which the consequences are severe.